definitely I know for a fact when my friend Nathan comes onto the podcast, there will be a lot of referring to Thomas Andrews as Daddy.
I'm never going to look at Thomas Andrews in the same way again now.
I'd say a majority of the people that are interested, younger people that are interested in the Titanic now, have come in because of the 97 film, and then they'll turn around and go, oh, that film's shit. But hang on a sec, that's what brought you into this.
You have the people saying, oh, you can't watch that because I don't like it.
And if you think that the ship fucking defied the laws of physics and turned into a V and did like acrobatics before it sank, you do you, boo. You live your best V-break life.
What makes it a good story, and who gatekeeps it being a good story, and why do we allow certain myths to go unchecked, and or why don't we allow them?
You take modern you and you put it on the Titanic, like what would I have done, what would people from modern day have done? And it is, after all, 1912 with 1912's traditions and people and.
So yeah, I'm excited to start. And I'm going to hit record kind of on my end. So put on your phone voices, turn into little angels, and no, not really, just be yourselves. Just do what we've been doing.
I'll use the customer care voice when I'm at work.
Absolutely. I'll suddenly turn British or like English.
Get all the fucks out.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Talk About Titanic podcast.
Hold up, actually.
If you'd like to talk about Titanic, press 1. Hit the iceberg, press 2.
Can we say fuck? Because I'm not gonna lie, I say it a lot.
Yeah. We need some rules about profanity, because that's swear a lot too.
You can absolutely say fuck.
Profanity.
I'm pretty sure, because the first episode was Louis and I, and we spoke about the 1997 film, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I'm pretty sure we swore quite a lot. And
yeah, I think we swore for the first 3 episodes we did, we swore, and then we got the Simon Medhurst episode, and I think we turned into angels for Simon.
Definitely, I know.
That was the last episode we did together, wasn't it? Simon Medhurst.
I think so. Definitely, I know for a fact when Nathan, my friend Nathan, comes onto the podcast, there will be a lot of referring to Thomas Andrews as Daddy. So that just basically, don't pretend to be anything you're not. If you want to swear, just fucking do it. Because see, at the end of the day, actually, if you did say something and then you mentioned me like, oh, by the way, that was a bit unflattering, could you take that out? I can take it out. Like, that's something that can happen as well.
I think that helps with the openness to swear a bit.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's no element.
It feels like constrained yourself. Yeah.
Like when I've spoken to Jordan before, Jordan swears a lot, and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm like, "Why are you apologising? I'm from fucking Scotland." Like, Jesus. Exactly. Kind of wanted to go round and do little intros for people, and I think in no particular order. I've kind of introduced myself before. I'll do it like super briefly. My name's Aaron. I am an artist, a writer, creative kind of person. I've been obsessed with the Titanic for a pretty long time. Probably since I was about 8, 7 or 8, about that. Pretty hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. It was possibly my brother talking to me about it when he was getting his ear pierced. The woman in the salon told me to distract him, and he's older than me. So I was like, what are you learning in high school? And he was like, oh, we're learning about the Titanic. And I was like, what's that? And he started telling me, and I was like, oh. And then I saw the film, and I was like, boobies. So that kind of was my introduction to Titanic, and it's just kind of carried on from there. So I do, this podcast, which I started with Louis. It was actually his idea.
And then I got lazy.
No, you got busy. I
got busy. I got very busy.
You got out of that lockdown and back into the hustle of the big city, London.
Yeah. And then I come in for a podcast and I'll be like, what are we talking about? Oh, no, yeah, I have nothing to say.
I've kind of taken my interest in that, I've geared it towards being like an outlet for different things that I like to do. So whether that's drawing, writing, or this, or just running my mouth. So that's me. And we'll move along to Dean. If you just give a little introduction about yourself, basically kind of what I did. You can go as in-depth or not as you want.
Cool. So, hello, I'm Dean. In terms of Titanic community stuff, I'm merely an observer. I don't really do any kind of like art or production or anything like that. I just love the subject. So I think my obsession, actually no, I know when my obsession started. It was in 1997 when I was about 8 years old. I think the film had just come out, and you probably all know of the kids show Blue Peter on BBC. So they did a segment on it, and I was just absolutely fascinated. I thought it was incredible. And then I think a few weeks later, I found a textbook at my primary school with a big painting. I think it was a Ken Marshall painting of the Titanic and it sinking. And I was just been hooked since then. So, bought as many books as I could, saw as many films and documentaries as I could. And yeah, for me, it's just something I love and just something I like to learn about and bug my other half about every now and again. And I think the quote, "You unimaginable bastard," is a regular one in my house.
Nice. It should be. I think everyone should have an unimaginable bastard in their home. It makes things more interesting. I do
some minor inconveniences, like can I have a cup of tea? Yeah, you unimaginable bastard.
Ideally, everyone should have a Billy Zane in their house, but hey ho, we can't have it all. So moving on, we'll just kind of keep going that way. Louis, my boy,
am I there?
Yeah. On you go.
Hi, I'm Louis. Let me do the radio. Hello, I'm Louis.
ASMR.
God,
I'm a phone voice.
Yeah. When I'm talking to tenants and landlords,
we're here to teach people, not to seduce them, please.
I'll try my best not to. My wife won't be happy.
If we have to do both for fingers, just.
So I have been obsessed. I love that we all use the word obsessed because it's an obsession. I've been obsessed with the Titanic since the age of 3. I saw A Night to Remember on TV, and it was in black and white, and I was watching it, and I was like, I like the film, but it's in black and white, so I don't like it. And then my dad went, well, there's a colour film out of it, and I went, what? And I saw that, and then it really sort of kicked off. I was the youngest member of the Titanic Society. They brought me in at the age of 4. I have a little certificate somewhere in my room.
I love that. They brought me in. Makes it sound like a cult.
Well, you should have seen the rituals to get in.
It's like Rosemary's Baby, God.
Would you accept Thomas Andrews as your Lord and Saviour?
Daddy.
Daddy. There we go, we've got our official kind of salute.
We get the third
Daddy.
Yeah, and then it just grew then, and then I created my Titanic Instagram at the height of lockdown purely out of a need to facilitate my Titanic interest further. And then I met Aaron, and I was like, he was like, hey, I want to do you wanted to make a film? And I was like, I want to make a podcast. And you were like, I want to make a podcast.
Yeah, I was like, that sounds easier than making a film. Let's do that.
Less effort.
Yeah. It turns out it wasn't less effort. Here we are. So hello.
But most projects are like that.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. So, Chandler, on you go.
Lovely, hiya. I'm Chandler. I live in Edinburgh at the minute, but I'm one of those Americans who doesn't live in America. So I lived in London for ages. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Spain. I've lived all over. And let's see, Titanic.
This is where he gets outed as someone that doesn't actually know anything about Titanic, and he just kind of wormed his way in, and he was like, is it the Lusitania? Is it that one? No?
Is it the Lusitania? Sorry, May 7th, 1915.
Yeah, this is awkward. Sorry.
Actually, I'm here to take this one over. We're going to actually talk about the Empress of Ireland from here on out. Like, that's where we're going. Really, really, really. That's shit, I think I was about 2 years old when my grandmother gave me a copy of the book Polar the Titanic Bear. And that one was written in 1916 by a Titanic survivor. If anyone knows, do you know who it is? Shout it out.
Was it Edith Russell?
No, it was Douglas Spedden's mother when he died in a car accident. Yeah, so that was like the way she wrote this book to like get over the grief of losing her son. And so she wrote a book from the perspective of his teddy bear, which was just a polar bear. And I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. It was really cool because it was about their travels in Europe and then their sailing on the Titanic and then them being back in America after. And I loved it. And I was like, I want more of this. So I got book after book after book after book after book and model and toys. I don't know if any of you ever had the plastic model that breaks in half when it sinks.
I
got two. I found one in a Goodwill once. It was brilliant.
So you're the reason I couldn't get one when I was young, because I could never find them. It's because Chandler was hoarding them all. He was just like collecting them all.
Well, that's why they're worth so much. I own all of them. Monopolizing them at the market. There we go. So I don't have a Titanic Instagram, I'm afraid. I've got my public actor Instagram, and then I've got like a private personal Instagram, and I feel like managing two is enough. So nothing else. I just follow a lot of them, and my friends get annoyed listening to me talk about it all the time. So that's that. And yeah, here I am.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Awesome. And Sebastian, last but not least.
Well, I'm Sebastian. I represent Denmark. Oh, sorry, this is not Eurovision.
It can be.
But no, yeah, sorry. I don't sound Scandinavian enough, it's because I've been spending the last few years talking to Brits, so that's why I think my interest in Titanic is almost as old as my interest in railways, so from whenever I could walk, I guess. I don't exactly know the point of where it started, but I think one of the moments that I remember it started was I think it was the Cameron movie, actually. So when you said, "Ooh, movies," I was like, yeah, that was my reaction. But another one was a documentary narrated in Danish. Don't know the name of the narrator, but it sort of captivated me because there's just something about Titanic. And since I had a history teacher who got me interested into history, it's just everything history related. So I think my interest is mainly like the events and the thoughts of the people and why they did what they did and what their actions led to and something like that. So yeah.
Brilliant, awesome. Do you know, just when you said, I know this isn't Eurovision, Jordan, who you'll meet, I'm sure at some point, Dean's like, Jordan loves Eurovision. He's like such a Eurovision whore. So if he'd have been here, he'd have like had to turn his camera off and have a lie down. Like he just wouldn't have been able to cope with that. So yeah, so love it. Great.
Well, I think that Eurovision is the worst thing that's ever happened on television.
I think you're the worst thing that's ever happened on television.
It's the greatest fight of the year.
Apart from ABBA, there's not much else that I can credit it for. Apart from saying that England is shit at everything.
Fair.
0 points last year.
Yeah, do you know... Fair.
No poor. That's what you say.
No poor. I'm going to be like taking notes of like points that people make. Like, point to Dean, point to Chandler, 2 points to Sebastian, and then at the end I'll like announce like who won. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, so cool. Thank you all very much for introducing yourselves. And this isn't the topic. This is just something that I kind of wanted to bring up because it's an interesting kind of crossover. So people would have heard Sebastian say that his initial or his main kind of interest is railways and trains and, steam engines, that kind of thing. I like trains. I like dancing. I have noticed such a huge... Chandler's like, what? I've noticed such a huge crossover between Titanic and a couple of other... I was going to say niche, but actually niche isn't... because they're quite broad, actually. A couple of other topics. So Titanic and 9/11 and Titanic and trains. It's a big... And the Titanic and trains one, I can see a little bit more because it's, it's like steam power. It's that kind of era of like evolution and, industrial revolution, all that kind of thing. The 9/11 one, I feel like that's deep. I feel like that could be like a whole other thing. Who knows? But comment if you want that. But I just kind of want to hear your take, Sebastian, on if you've ever wondered why that is, if you've ever noticed that, why do you think it is? Just curious to pick your brain on that a bit.
Well, I can definitely comment on the railways one. But personally, for me, it's because there was a Danish railway-related person who died on the Titanic. And sort of to go over very short, his name was Jacob Milling, and he was his chief engineer for the South Funen Railways. And after having trial run one of his newest engines, he went on a trip to the US, never made it there. And what I find really sort of a little bit sad about his story was that Well, he didn't like a lot of expenses, so one of the things he did was sending a very short telegram to his wife, which was basically just some letters that in code was something along the lines of, everything's fine, the ship is good. And one of the last thing he was heard saying during the sinking was, oh no, what do I do now? I just told my wife I was okay.
Wow.
But yeah, that's a connection there for me. And he's buried in Copenhagen, so I've been there to sort of find his grave, and that was like a real good thing. But I think you were onto something with the whole mechanism of interest in steam locomotives and interesting in Titanic being a steam ship, because there definitely are some parallels there.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm going to jump in on 9/11 real quick, because this is one that it's an odd one. But I think the first time I ever saw something about 9/11 and Titanic was in one of those like small magazines you would get like once a week, and I remember it popped around. It arrived in the post, and I opened it because I was like, oh, the Titanic's on the cover, let's see what it is. And it was actually an article about 9/11, but they were using like this picture, like one of the etchings of the Titanic sinking as like a comparison, making a direct comparison. Like the Titanic was this big disaster, and like this is this big disaster. And I feel like this was in 2002, 2003. It was not very far after 9/11. And I think part of like the connection they were making is like, this was an event that's like going to live in people's minds. This is an event that like is going to change the way we think about the world. But actually, when you think about it, the interest in Titanic waned pretty quickly. Like Titanic sinks 2 years later, there's the war. There's then the 20s, there's the Depression, there's the Second World War. And it wasn't really until the 50s that when A Night to Remember came out, it was made. I don't even started thinking about it, and then it sort of quieted down again, and then occasional blips for like the film. What was SOS Titanic was at 1977, and then
39, I think.
So there's not really as much of a comparison, but I think people think, ooh, lots of people died in a tragic incident connection. Boom.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this, and we can keep talking about this for a little bit longer, because it's actually a good segue onto the actual topic, because it's online, it's discourse, it's relevant. But I'm working on a video essay just now, which I'm going to upload on the 10th, which is, I've not kind of got a title, but the working title is Misunderstanding the Past, or Misinterpreting the Past Teaches Us Nothing About Today. And it's about the kind of correlations that people have been using in the news with a lot of things, 9/11 included, and Titanic. And in the last 2 years, the kind of comparisons people have been making between the COVID pandemic and Titanic, and how actually the fact that people on whole don't understand the nuances and the kind of the decisions that were made and the real life people on the Titanic, it gives politicians and stuff nowadays a pass that they don't deserve, because people think that Bruce Esme was this villain, like twirling his mustache, and that he was like, "Oh, crash the ship," like, and that's not the case. Like,
Marsh feed.
yeah, and it's people genuinely think that, but that's not the case. And that isn't me just saying that to be like a little edgelord and like, oh, Bruce Esme was a good guy. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he was bad or good. I'm saying like he was a guy. Like, he was just a person.
He was human. Yeah,
he was human.
Yeah,
and the fact that people view these people in the past as these huge, almost like Greek tragedy, like fable, like almost not real people anymore. It's surpassed that. It's not real anymore. It's either.
I feel like in the first episode when we spoke about the 97 film, we also had a brief moment where we were talking about how that blame was put onto him, but then we both agreed if we were there, we would try to get off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people always say, oh, I would have stayed on till the end, I would have stepped back, but
would you know?
the water is freezing and you only had like 20 boats to get off that fucking ship.
Yeah.
You want to get off.
Romanticization, isn't it? Like how, a lot of people are just like, big bad event. Oh, I know another big bad event that was popularized in 1997, So I think it's that basic line of bad event, people died, so it's the same.
And it's actually not helpful. It's helpful in the sense that it gives people a very understandable point of reference. But that's where it ends for me, because then people are like, oh, well, I mean, what I say, I'm just using Trump as an example. You could say, in fact, Boris Johnson, we'll say Boris Johnson. You know, what Boris Johnson?
Bring the tone down that bad.
Yeah, no, but people will look at him and say what he's doing is bad, but you know what Ismay did is worse. Like Boris Johnson might be a lot of things, but he would never just let women and children die so that he could get on a lifeboat. And it's like, well, tech.
I'm not going to say what I'm about to
no,
say.
and tech.
Allow me, Chandler. But he will definitely go to his birthday party that he didn't know was a party while people died in hospital. And
Oh my God.
Exactly. So
that you were gonna.
So people could make these.
No comment.
Yeah, people can make these comparisons, and that's fine. But actually, it doesn't hold out. It doesn't hold any water because the comparison's wrong from the get-go. Because Ismay didn't, by all accounts, sneak onto the boat. You know,
No.
So there's nuance that people don't understand, and so therefore the comparisons just don't work. And actually, the more that the mainstream media uses Titanic as comparisons, the nuance, it's gone. The nuance, like, we're never ever going to get that nuance back. People,
it's not like Ismay stood there and went, "No, you can't go on. You're a man. You can't go on. You're a man. I'm going to get on." You know, I like Matt Hancock.
I use him as the example because I think he is the perfect example of someone that kind of did, you know, something like that was the most comparable thing. But yeah, so basically just, I guess what I'm trying to get at is people like us understand the nuance and we enjoy the nuance and we appreciate it. But on the whole, the kind of general public don't. So it will always be used as an example in a comparison, but it's not a good one because people don't actually understand the real decisions that were made in the past. So it gives people nowadays a pass that they don't deserve, I think.
Yeah.
So if you just understand Titanic on a surface level, you're not really going to understand the whole thing because, well, again, drawing me back to the railways, it's like there's a lot of things where people are like, oh, I've heard this is true, and that just spins up a lot of myths, and you don't really get to the important stuff about Titanic and why certain things of the story in Titanic is important. Because you can take some things in Titanic and use them in modern day, but you really need to work on the context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, because I think I wouldn't want people to think what I'm or what we're saying is don't use it as a kind of cautionary tale. Absolutely use it as a cautionary tale, but know, like you're saying, know the context. Yeah, so that was an interesting little segue. I enjoyed that.
Well, interesting. That's good. It's always an interesting one where it's like they didn't know, like he wasn't doing anything outside the norm at the time. So obviously, in like hindsight's 20/20 in all cases, but like Ismay wasn't doing anything that any other person at the time who ran a shipping company would have been doing either. Like, Titanic didn't even go that fast compared to other ships. So it's like,
because the comparison I give is, so with the pandemic, you know, there were kind of mock pandemic scenarios. There was Operation Cygnus in 2016, which basically pretended that everything that's happened to us now happened in 2016. And the professionals said to government, you do know that millions of people are going to die because you don't have this, that, the next thing. And they're like, oh, we'll get it. Okay, we'll get it. And then they went away and the politicians were like, we're not getting it. Fuck that. And look where we are. Whereas actually the Titanic had more lifeboats than was required by law.
Yes.
Captain Smith went further south.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say Captain Smith, changed course a little bit because he thought he was avoiding icebergs. So actually, they were taking proactive steps, whereas
so do all they could. Yeah,
we didn't. We've not. So yeah. So shall we move on to le topic?
I feel like I've missed out. I keep seeing this pop up and I'm like, I've missed a thread somewhere. I don't quite get what happened.
So I was
that's me with memes on the internet all the time. Like, I'm always 2 months behind. So when I'm like, oh, that's funny, people are like, yeah, it's dead.
It's an interesting one because I kind of want Louis, because I can see in his little face, Louis is like buzzing because it's a lot. It's so much. I would wake up to messages from Louis because he sent me screenshots from the Facebook group being like, look what she's done now, look at this, and I'm like, oh my god, and we're just both like, can't believe that she's at it again. But it's
like every morning I'd wake up to a post, sorry if I offended anyone last night, sorry if I offended anyone last night with this, I didn't mean to, sorry if I did this, oh, can we not post any Jack and Rose, oh, but we've made a subgroup for this, actually no, you know what, You don't have to post it to the subgroup, but if you're in the subgroup, please do. But if you're not, then don't.
It's like, this one Facebook group has now been like divided. It's got like so many little subgroups. It's got a subgroup for art. It's got a subgroup for Jack and Rose. It's got all these tiny little subgroups because it wants to kind of like siphon all the undesirable stuff away. You know, it's like, take your Jack and Rose and do it over there. Take your art, do it over there. Take your fucking V-Break and take your this Olympic switch and do it over there. And it's like, that's fine, but you've made a group that's got like close to like 50,000 people. What did you expect when you started this group? What did you think was going to happen? Did you think that everyone was just going to come and all sing from the same hymn sheet? And, you know, I don't understand it. And it spiraled because you've got an admin person who's got this massive ego. And it was a shame because the other admins, one of which I was actually speaking to one-on-one, and she was like, I don't know what to do because the person who created the group is doing nothing. We've got an admin that's just running rampant and is, you know, throwing spanners in the works left, right, and centre. People, you know, there was even a post that she made saying, should we ban new members for 3 days from making any posts? And it's like, well, no, because then people aren't going to want to join the group. And that means you're assuming, and I think that shows the visceral hatred that people have for the 1997 film. You're assuming that every new person that joins this group is only joining because of the film, which might be true, because, you know, all of us can maybe say that the film is part of what got us interested in it, the James Cameron film. But, you know, this admin, this moderator is saying, you know, any new person is not allowed to post for 3 days. And if they can last those 3 days, then they are true Titanic fans. You know, if they can contain themselves for 3 days from not posting about bloody James Cameron, then they've earned their place. And it's like, what?
It's interesting because it gives me a headache. It's interesting because a lot of people, I'd say a majority of the people that are interested, you know, younger people that are interested in the Titanic now, have come in because of the 97 film. And then they'll learn more about the actual ship, and then they'll turn around and go, oh, that film's shit. But hang on a sec, that's what brought you into this. Mm-hmm. So it can't be that bad if it's the thing that's brought you into this passion. And then they're turning around saying, actually, don't post about this because it's not actually that good. Well, hang on a second, that's what brought me here in the first place. That's why my life has been taken over by this.
Online communities, you see it in so many different groups, don't you? It's like there might be like a collective of things, like obviously you have the Titanic movies, and there's always that one where like you have a new person who's interested and you have the people saying, oh, you can't watch that because I don't like it. It's like, you shouldn't do that. Like Silent Hill, for example, a lot, like a video game, a lot of people say, oh, don't play them past this game because the rest is shit. It's like, but why? You know, you miss out on so much stuff by doing that, and I just do not understand that mentality.
And people can make their own assumptions. If people go on and play those other games, they can say they were shit, or they can say, actually, I like them, you know? And I don't... It's a funny one, because people listening to this might say, so are you endorsing the switch theory? Are you endorsing the coal fire? You know, are you endorsing the V-break? And it's like, I'm not endorsing it. I'm saying, go and watch it. If you want to watch Aaron 1912 and come away, and if you think that the ship fucking defied the laws of physics and turned into a V and did like acrobatics before it sank, you do you, boo. You live your best V-break life.
Chandra, I feel like Chandra was holding his tongue there. I saw you sort of look to the side as if to go, what the fuck?
No, quite literally, the sun is setting in the most beautiful way, and I'm like by a window, so like, distracted by calm.
I thought that was a... That's right.
I was just like, did I hear a vibration somewhere?
It's just ranting away about that kind of thing, and you're like, the most beautiful sunset over there.
So stunning.
I was worried that Aaron 1912 was at his window. Aaron 1912 was looking at him going, don't diss my theory, don't diss my V-break.
Don't do it.
You know, I've got an odd one, because I've got a bit of a social experiment for us. I am not a member of this group, and I have no idea what group this is. So what I'm going to do is join it and see what happens from an outside perspective, because I was sort of like, I don't really use Facebook very much. It's sort of like, I haven't used it in ages. So I was like, I'm going to join it, just because reading through what people have been talking about, I was like, this is such a divisive thing in terms of what it seems to be going on inside of it. So I was like, let's join and just see what comes, see what happens. So it's
It all kind of started, surprisingly, and I almost forgot because it spiraled. It basically was around Valentine's Day, either the day of or just after. And there was the Owl Kitty video where someone had edited that black cat into the position of Rose.
That was so good.
And it was funny. Someone shared it.
I fucking love that. I just saw that and I was like, that's the funniest thing, the most wholesome
Everyone
I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It just worked.
It was just like and it went.
You could have made the original movie just about the damn cat, and I would still have loved it.
Yeah, exactly. And people were sharing it because it was like super viral, but it was also relevant because it's Titanic. So people shared it to the group, and she was like, nothing Jack and Rose related, and it was a whole thing. And people were like, really? Like, nothing Jack and Rose related? Like, so does that mean we can't even post something about Kate Winslet's costumes in the film and say, how accurate is this to the period? Because that would come
of costume in one scene.
Yeah, because that would technically come under Jack and Rose, So are we only allowed to talk about the costumes of the other characters? It seemed so ludicrous that it all spawned from that, and it just kind of showed, the kind of the vitriol that goes towards the James Cameron film, which I personally don't think is deserved. I think it's a tricky one because there are two big Facebook groups that are specifically for the film, and they're huge. They've got like 400,000 members, whereas like other solely Titanic ones or RMS Titanic ones have like tens of thousands, which is still amazing. But it just kind of shows the level of interest that the film has that the ship itself doesn't. The ship has kind of gone either to, it's gone to like Greek fable or Jack and Rose. It's those two ends of the spectrum, and then somewhere in the middle you've got the truth. Somewhere in the middle. It's hidden, and it's a bit murky, but it's there.
Under the surface, it's sung with a ship.
Yeah, it's like, it's 2.5 miles down, but it's there. So... Yeah, Chandler, I think you should just go straight in and post something about Kate Winslet and just be...
Well, what I'm doing, here's the deal. I'm joining right this second, quite literally. Gordon, can I read you this question? Can I just read this to you?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Okay. This group is dedicated exclusively to the real RMS Titanic. This is not a movie group, full stop. Posts pertaining to fiction are not allowed. Prohibited subjects include, but are not limited to, fictional characters, stories, storylines, props, and movie soundtracks. Do you agree or disagree with this? Like, goodness me! Like, what is this? What is this?
Is this the one that's just RMS Titanic? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
On another note, you could actually do audiobooks and I would listen to them all day. I'm not even kidding. You have that kind of voice.
I think you should find a photo of Victor Garber and post it with the caption "Daddy Andrews." If you don't, I will.
If there's going to be a subreddit one day, I'm going to leave the internet just for stuff.
Louis like, help.
I'm going to join it.
I'm never going to look at Thomas Andrews in the same way again now. You really
just walking past the statue at a museum, you're like, no.
Oh, hey, Daddy.
Honestly, that's hilarious. That's so funny. When I was, what age was I? I was like 15 or 16. And on fanfiction.net, I wrote a story about Thomas Andrews and Rose. And it became not only the highest read and reviewed Thomas Rose fiction, but among like the top 5 Titanic fanfictions. It was like, people didn't know that there's a 50, and actually it was very clean. There was no like smut or anything in it. It was pretty tame actually, but people did not know it was someone who hadn't even left high school yet that was writing this. They thought it was some like middle-aged housewife that was like sexually repressed and bored. And it was like, no, it's me.
Do you still have it, and can you share it with us, please?
It's on fanfiction.net, and it's called The Irishman's Young Rose. And it's a fully finished, complete... I sent it to my friend Nathan recently, and he clearly had read the first chapter because he sent me like a line from it in capital letters, and I was like, oh God. He's halfway through. I'll get Chandler to read it, and I'll release it on Audible. Yeah, Chandler.
So I found it, but we have an actor to read it.
I
drop in the chat. Come on.
I found two. There's a number 1 and a number 2. Did you write number 2 as well?
I started to write number 2, and then I thought better of it. I decided against it.
Oh, starts April 11th, 1912 at 1 o'clock. Right.
I'm starting to feel like we're diving into the origins of where Daddy comes from.
Oh yeah.
I'm a little bit scared. I'm not going to lie.
That's a whole podcast in itself.
Is this going to turn into a smut podcast?
I'm afraid it already has.
Each week we have to find a different fanfic.
Oh god.
It'll turn into Harry and Draco next week.
May I put my hand here?
Next week, Captain Smith and Bruce Ismay.
Oh Jesus!
Alone in the wheelhouse.
God no, no.
It's what we need to do to keep us warm, but rather not if it's all the same to you, all right?
This has been a wild ride so far.
I'm having so much fun.
I'm glad. I'm really glad. Any 10-year-olds that currently listen to the podcast, their parents could be like, "You're not listening to that again. That's filth." Oh, Louis got a little background. How fancy!
Oh, Louis! Look. Oh wow! He just.
Oh.
I did.
Hey, Louis. Where's Sven?
Hello. Where's Sven? Sven, are you finished?
I feel we got undeservedly cheated for representation in Scandinavia discrimination. Come on, man. Tweets in the beginning of the movie. Fabrizio falls in love with a Norwegian. She didn't get to the Norwegian line. Where's the Danes? There are 8 of us in the ship. Where are we? There was one Dane in the 96 miniseries, yeah, but she was played by a fucking German.
There's actually is her name Helga? Is that Fabrizio's kind of love interest?
Yes. Oh yeah.
She's Swedish.
Helga's Norwegian.
Scandinavian.
Keeping it vague. I like it. Scandinavian. I bet James Cameron was like, Scandinavian, sure. He probably thought the Irish mother was Scottish. He was like, yeah, she's Scottish, duh. I can't believe that that's the same actress who was in Terminator. That's just wild. The transformation there, it's insane. I forget her name. But she plays, she's got a skinhead, she's really tanned. The freckles that she has in the Titanic film are fake. They just totally transformed her. And the accent
Jeanette
is
Goldstein.
That's it, yes. Honestly.
No, Louis. What?
That's the same actress.
April 11th, 1912, 1 o'clock.
Oh no.
I can hear you.
And as the opened automatically, a gentle breeze from the sea air blew across her hair, a stray red strand blowing out of place.
Thomas whipped his cock out.
What chapter's the worst chapter, would we say? Which one's got the most,
We're not going to do a complete read-through, are we?
Go halfway through, maybe.
I'm jumping to 19.
There's a
April
scene
15th,
of
1:30 a.m. No, we'll go further back. 1:05.
I'm doing word finding. I've typed in sex, penis, no dick. There's no dick in there.
When the officer saw the water, his face turned white and his eyes flew open. Fuck me. That's literally. This is chapter 17.
Is he speaking to Thomas Andrews there?
No, I don't know. It's no, thank you, but I do recommend you go up on deck. Well, yes. Let's go to chapter 15. 12:25. We'll go actually chapter 13.
Oh god, there's a lot of chapters, aren't there?
11:40.
It's funny. I've done a lot of writing, but I've never done anything like that.
I've written a lot of Titanic stories, but never.
I'm planning one, but I've never got as far as writing. I wrote some stories in school about some inspired stories based on, basically.
Yeah, I wrote some stuff. I remember I wrote some stuff for English in school. I wrote a big story about it, but it wasn't based on anything. It was literally just I created everything and set it on the ship, and it was pretty good. I think I still have it somewhere.
I like creativity.
I was 12. I'm sure I have it in a folder somewhere.
I used to make
drawings as well.
I used to have my Playmobil figures, and I used to make sets out of cardboard. And I had at one point I made a set that was the entire forward section of the boat deck with the bridge and part of the officers' quarters, and you could take off the top and like you could go in the bridge and the wheelhouse. Wow. And I had all this like out of cardboard, not coloured in or anything. And then I'd put a black and white filter on my camera, like my little camcorder, and I'd just film Titanic movies. And then eventually I'd sink it slowly into the bath, and I made like a grand staircase, a really bad grand staircase, and all this stuff. And I used to love doing that. I think I made about 5 Titanic movies a week.
Did you post those on YouTube?
No.
You're not Cardboard Titanic then?
No, I'm
Cardboard Titanic is incredible. Like, the way that they were able to not only make a model that, considering it's made out of cardboard, it's pretty bloody good, but the angles they get with the camera are
so good.
Awesome.
I sometimes wonder if they've made another. So, like, when you see the interior, I've got a feeling that it's not the same as the exterior.
Yeah, I think they've made individual models.
And like sets, haven't they?
Yeah, they also made one...
Almost like television.
What?
No way.
You mean if you go inside the pub in EastEnders, it's not really a pub?
I know, right? But the bridge, when you see the wheelhouse sinking, and they've got little cardboard, like, people, like, standing just... You know, they're being very stoic. They're just standing there as like the water rises, and they're like, "Yep," like very British of them, very British. That's like an individual little set, but Cardboard Titanic.
Oh, good.
I've got my little paint animations on YouTube, which is hilarious. My brother, when I showed him, because obviously he knew that I was doing that when I was like 10. But then I showed him a couple of years ago, and he was like, "Aaron, this has like 500,000 views. Why the fuck didn't you monetize it?" And I was like, "You couldn't." When, you know, back then, I don't think you could at all. And then I don't think even now you can monetize until you've got over 1,000 subscribers. It's like, it's a whole thing.
You can, I've got 300, I think, and I can monetize, but I think I've made 0.2 pence over a few years. So,
wow, you're a rich man.
Yeah.
Oh, so
I don't mean to brag.
I'm thinking that's really strange. So you can monetize with, I think, any amount of subscribers, but it's community posts. You need 1,000 subscribers to be able to make community posts, which is really strange. So you can make money off YouTube at any amount of subscribers, but you can only write to your subscribers after you've got 1,000. That seems really strange, really odd.
Because if you have a video that, you know, gets hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, but no one subscribes, I mean, people are going to subscribe if they see that, but if they don't, I guess there's some sort of earnest of, well, you've got this many views, we should be giving you money because you're bringing revenue to the site, because of especially the adverts, because you can choose to put adverts on a video.
Yeah. So
I think that's very...
I've not been able to monetize any of my videos because obviously I use clips that they're fair use, but it comes under like Creative Commons, so you can't monetarily benefit from it, but you can use them. You just can't profit from it because it's like CC Creative Commons. But going forward, I'm thinking, so for the one that I want to do in April, I'm like, how do I want to go about doing this? Because there's a lot of footage I could use and want to use. News footage would be fine. So, because obviously the BBC isn't going to like copyright strike you, I hope. Who knows? It's a brave new world. They might.
Well, I don't know. They're losing their license fee at some point in the future. So
can you imagine that the BBC just becomes like this YouTube like baddie, you know, big YouTube villain. But so yeah, I'm thinking like, what do I want to do? Like, I could just do. I don't know, because I feel like when you're making a YouTube video, some people want to sit and watch someone talk for like a period of time, but other people don't. Some people don't even watch the video on YouTube, they just listen to what's being said. I do that a lot. I'll play like a YouTube video and I'll just listen to what's being said as opposed to actually watching everything playing out.
I do that when I'm at work. I stick it on just while I'm working away.
And just listen. For the real-time syncings, so either Honor and Glory or... I mean, I'll watch bits of it, but then a lot of it, it's very...
Nothing happens.
Yeah, there's not much happening.
It's all like the last 20 minutes, isn't it? That's where the real stuff is.
Yeah, that's when you want to like tune in. When you hear that, you know, you're getting to that point, you know, like 2 a.m, then you're like, right, I'll watch now. But yeah, the collision and that, definitely. Because like for the book I'm writing, so it's interesting you kind of say that, because I'm like, you know... It's different when you're watching like a real time, because anyone that was actually on the ship would be like, fuck you, there wasn't much happening, there was quite a lot happening. And it's like, well, yeah, there was. But there was more happening, like you say, in the last kind of 20 minutes. It was very kind of intense. So for what I'm doing, for the whole sinking, I want to do one, maximum 2 drawings for every 5 minutes. So it kind of depends what's happening. If there wasn't much happening, if it was people just kind of floating around and waiting to go into a lifeboat, 1 drawing, that'll do. And then 5 minutes later, if there was maybe something quite dramatic going on below deck and then something happening above deck, I might do 2, but we'll see. But then, yeah, definitely for like the final plunge, it's like 2 drawings for every like 30 seconds. Like,
have you seen the book Titanic at 2?
I got it recently. I'd only ever seen, so I think, because in the book it mentions his website, which is now like defunct, it doesn't exist. But I used to go on it a lot and just drool over Paul J. Quinn's artwork. I thought it was incredible. And then it, either the website disappeared or I got into porn. I don't know, but I was no longer looking at Paul J. Quinn. Let's put it that way. And then
you were writing your fan fiction.
I was writing my fan fiction. There we go. But then when I tried to find them years later, I couldn't. And which, good, quite right. Because it's his work. He produced that. And even though me buying the book didn't benefit him monetarily, it's good that people can't just use his stuff. I don't know if they could even contact him to license it for things. I'm not sure. But I bought Titanic at 2 and I bought Dusk Till Dawn, and it was so like heartwarming seeing these illustrations and paintings that I used to look at when I was young, and really interesting. There were some of them that I always thought were done on MS Paint or some kind of primitive early version of MS Paint because they look quite boxy and they look pixelated, but actually when you look at it close up in the book, I think it's on canvas, but I think it's quite a small canvas. And because obviously a canvas is made up of individual like threads. Yeah. And I think actually what's happened is he's just used quite broad strokes with a brush and it's picked up the kind of canvas, like mesh of the canvas quite prominently. But actually when you look at it from far away, it looks digital. But when you look close up, you can tell it's painted. So that kind of blew my mind when I bought the book and was like, oh my god, my life's been a lie. Like I thought Paul J. Quinn was using MS Paint like me, motherfucker. Like now it's just me spending 6 hours drawing like one section of Titanic on MS Paint, like an idiot. But never mind. So
I mean, when I saw your drawings for the first time, I was like, you can't be using MS Paint. You're pulling all the other one. Yeah. Because I'm using Sketchbook Pro. And that's just a different software. That I was just like, but he could do that in this software. Holy shit! I hate to admit it, but I think when I first saw your Instagram, when I first became aware, I think you had about 4 or 5 posts. Because I then saw your artwork and started sharing it, but I looked at it and I think I messaged you. I can't remember saying, by the way, the middle propeller only had 3 blades, not 4 blades. I think I was one of them.
And I was just like,
There's always one.
Yeah. There's always one plus like 20,000 more. Like, it was actually a big part of the reason why I pulled away from the Instagram for a while. I kind of turned it into a personal Instagram and just didn't draw for a while. It was a combination of lockdown had ended, because the reason, Louis kind of touched on earlier why he started his Instagram, and it was pretty much the same for me. He started his quite a few weeks before me, and he got like thousands of followers in those few weeks. His Instagram really blew up. But and
then stopped.
Well, it's like anything. If you're not posting, people just... But I'm sure you'll wake up and you'll have like 10 new followers and you've not posted in however long, and you're like, oh, cool. It's one of these things. People find it and they'll follow it because Titanic's in the title and it's like, it's worth following. But I had all these drawings on my laptop that I posted them to my Facebook, like my personal Facebook, and like people that I worked with and like friends from school would be like, oh, these are so cool, and that was great, and it gave me like a wee buzz, and I was like, oh, awesome. But then it was my personal Instagram. It was just like Aaron Flanagan, and I was like, oh, I could maybe post stuff on this. But then I never used Instagram. I didn't see the point. Now I see the point in a big way, but I didn't then. And I was like, since I don't use it, I'll just change the name. So I changed it to Titanic Artist, and I posted a few of them. And I was like, this makes sense, because you can add tags. And I didn't really see the utility of tags until I started using Instagram for what it's meant to be used for. And then I was like, okay, right. So I can actually find people that are interested in shit that I'm interested in. Duh, that makes sense. So, yeah, it was just... And then I kind of thought, well, I could start drawing again, because all the drawings I was posting were like 6 years old at that time. So I was like, I could maybe do some like new ones, because I've got so much free time to kill, and that's what happened. But then, yeah, it was a mixture of... Not criticism, because I don't mind criticism, because actually there was one drawing I did which took so long, and I don't regret it, because it killed weeks of my time, and it was fun to do, and there was literally nothing else to do at that time. But then I posted it, and this one person was just so harsh, and I can't remember everything that they said, but one thing that they said was, and you've not even included the shear of the ship. And I was like, the shear? And I thought it was a typo. I was like, what the fuck is shear, you bitch? And then I Googled it, and I was like, oh, he's right. Oh, fuck.
You wee bastard.
Yeah, I was like, I had drawn the ship like a straight line. And I was like, that'll do, donkey, that'll do. But then, actually, no, because I know, Chandler, I might as well just like fucking end it all, But...
Wait, give up.
But then...
Empress of Ireland, here we come.
Empress of Ireland artist. But
it's got a nice ring to it.
But honestly, so it was just little things like that have stuck with me. So now when it's almost like PTSD. So when I'm drawing the ship, instead of drawing a straight line, I'm like, I'll draw like a banana. I'm like, there we go. There's your shear.
That's what criticism does to you. I've had it all the time with my videos. It's just like, your clips are so uneven. Oh, I guess I'll realign it.
Yeah, totally. But so, and I thought, I got back into work, and I was just kind of doing my thing again. I thought, not that I didn't see the point, but I kind of didn't see the point. But it's really interesting, because I now Facebook and Instagram are so different. If you want to start a business, I think Facebook, I know Facebook is the place to do it. So we kind of earlier said, I don't really use Facebook. I think it was Chandler was like, I don't use Facebook, which I honestly don't really use either, except for groups. That's where it excels. It's fantastic for groups. Zuckerberg, for all that he's like a lizard person and stuff, like he really knew what he was doing when he like made Facebook and made groups, because they're fantastic. And because it connects with a different kind of clientele, your boomers and stuff, it's people that do have a bit more disposable income. So when they see something they like, they're more willing to say, oh, I'll buy that. I'll commission something. Or whereas Instagram's, there's less engagement. It's so passive. You can have 20,000 followers on Instagram, and then you can post to your story saying, I need like a blood transfusion, or I need £10. Can anyone spare me it? And you'll get no engagement. If you put that on Facebook, you'll have like 50 people offering you blood and £10. Like, it's just, they're totally different audiences. It's, on Instagram, it's much younger.
I've told you once, and I'll tell you again, I'm not giving you my fucking blood, okay?
But I want it.
Stop going on about it.
Please.
You're not having my blood.
You're not. Oh, Chandler. Oh,
no, Chandler. He's going into the rabbit hole. Guys, get him out of there.
It's a battle of the backgrounds here, so it is.
Isn't that the actual, 100% accurate depiction that John Thayer actually did draw himself?
The original V-Break, yeah.
This is the original. I own the original, clearly. Took a picture of it with my phone, uploaded it. Here we are.
Chandler's got a cupboard in his house that's full of those plastic breakable models, like to the ceiling, and then he's also got like the framed, signed, like first edition drawing of that. Totally. So to kind of touch back on the topic, because actually, as much as we've kind of gone on tangents, it's all been pretty relevant. Don't get me wrong. There's hella chunks I'm cutting out of this, but
I know.
Not much.
I wonder why. So there's certain names we can't mention.
Because actually, it's not a lot, but
Hancock.
Well. Matt Hancock was actually one of the more relevant things that we spoke about, surprisingly. But to kind of go back to the idea of gatekeeping, we've kind of spoke about that. We kind of touched on it, but I kind of want to think, do you guys actually see a benefit of it? So we've kind of jokingly mentioned, we just mentioned the V-break, the illustration there. I can't remember who drew it, but it wasn't Jack there. He described it, but then he later distanced himself from it. He was like, I don't agree with that illustration. I wish my name wasn't on it, because although he described it to the person on Carpathia, he looked at it and was like, that's not... It's like that very famous police sketch where the person described the person that had like mugged them or whatever, robbed them. And then the policeman was like, is this it? And they'd literally drawn like an egg. Like they'd drawn a circle and that was it. And the person was like, no, because the person had eyes and like a mouth and a nose. So yeah, drawing's hard. But
there was I think there was a Titanic survivor that did draw the sinking, but I can't remember what role he had on the ship, if he was a fireman or something.
Yeah.
But that's like the closest we have to like a witness sort of description of it.
Totally.
Which was drawn for someone.
Just on a slight tangent, I found, just sending them through now, I found pictures on my old hard drive of that set that I was talking about that I've just sent to the chat.
Oh, this is very good.
Oh, man.
Excellent.
This is some...
I mean, you can tell it's old pictures by just looking at the VHS player underneath the TV.
Oh,
Playmobil, that's the one for me.
I feel like one of the last generations growing up with VHS.
Yeah, I loved it. And there's videos as well, but I wasn't going to send them videos of like the Grand Staircase, but they're very old, blurry, like 10 frame per second videos.
That's
amazing.
But yeah, I used to make little movies with those. And,
the closest
in the bath, kill them with water.
Closest I ever did to that, and it's you'll probably all have these little stories of you'll look at something and be like, I can turn that into Titanic. So it was 2 massive blocks of polystyrene from a box, so they were like protecting like a flat screen TV or something. But if I put them both together, I made like a big rectangle, and I was like, I can turn that into Titanic. I took two drumsticks, just like actual wooden drumsticks, and shoved them into the polystyrene, so that became the masts. I put 4 toilet roll tubes on it, funnels, there you go.
Nice.
But I sat the whole thing on top of a lamp, and the lamp lit it up, so that was cool. Cluedo, the board game Cluedo, the little figures, I stood them on it, and that was little people. So I only had like 6 people on it, but that's fine, that's okay. Less deaths. Although all 6 people then got tipped into the bath. And because I was not happy with the bath water being clear, I took like 4 black colouring pens and dipped it into the water to make it black. And it might have stained the bath, and my dad might have been really angry. And I might also have dipped the lens of my little camcorder into the water to see if it could go underwater, and it ruined the camera. And he also might have been really angry at that. But yeah, it was fun. It was creative. It was, I was testing my limits, and apparently the camera did not approve.
They tend to not. The older ones tend to not.
No.
The most important thing is you learned something.
I did.
Exactly.
But Louis put so much more effort into that. He didn't just take like 2 forms of polystyrene and was like, this will do. He actually he made a little first class entrance sign. That's
cool. I used to go into so much detail with those. I also I used to just love building stuff out of cardboard. So back on the 9/11 thing, I've also had that sort of like that crossover. I've always been obsessed with any sort of disaster or incident, and Titanic's always been the one. But then it's also things like, I remember, I don't know if anyone here used to watch Waterloo Road, which was set in a secondary school in the north of England, and they were scummy students and stuff. But there was an episode where there was an explosion in the school, and the school caught fire, and everyone was running around trying to get out of the school. And that caught my attention as well. And I ended up making a cardboard school, and I made my own episode of Waterloo Road. And I went into the garden, and I was like, Dad, I'm just going to film a video in the garden. Okay, yeah, that's fine. It's like, he's always filming videos. Got a lighter, set fire to it. I'm filming it up close. The whole thing went up in flames. My dad comes out. What the hell is going on here? I was like, the school's on fire.
obviously.
And also the garden.
Jesus.
I love that dedication. You know, you want real physical effects, not the CGI stuff.
No. I did eventually learn how to use After Effects and that sort of stuff, but at that point, I was very into my pyrotechnics. I've probably got that somewhere on this external hard drive hidden as well. But yeah.
So probably when Louis saw the Honor and Glory real-time syncing animation with the third funnel or second funnel, like flames shoot out the top of it, Louis was like, "Yeah, flames, fire, more."
Flames.
Yeah, he was like, "Bring it on."
Pretty lights.
Pretty lights. I remember being really shocked when they did that, because it seemed like, you know, I trust them, and I still do trust them, although I'm the guy that made the YouTube video. I do have faith in what they do, but when I remember watching that and being very like taken aback, like, oh, that's very Hollywood. How scandalous! Gosh, is Michael Bay directing this? Like,
I think they did say something about that video, and it was more of like it was based off of a survivor testimony, because it's the same one where the ship splits in half and then goes sideways and sort of just slips sideways. And I think they wrote underneath saying this is a recreation of a survivor testimony rather than what they think happened. And then everyone saw it and went, "What the fuck is this?" without seeing that it was from a survivor testimony. And I think they sort of got a bit...
They got a lot of blowback from that one, actually.
They should have said it clearly on the video rather than the description underneath. They should have said, this is based off a survivor testimony.
Yeah, because people don't read description. They just see something in the video and they go straight at it. It's happened on almost all of my videos. It's just so, and I goes, if you read the description, you'll clearly get your answer, question answered. It's just, come on.
I used to read the description back in the day, because I'm pretty sure that's where you could only, if you clicked like the down arrow to expand the description, that's when you got a full picture of the amount of views and the likes and dislikes. So I used to always read the description for those kind of things. Whereas now you'll see YouTube titles that say like read description, like it's in the title.
Yeah.
Because that's how lazy people are nowadays. You actually have to tell them to read the description for them to read the description.
It doesn't come say that anyway, and people will not do it. Or it'll say, watch till the end. It doesn't get to the end. They'll be like, well, how comes this happened? That's not realistic. Did you watch to the end?
Exactly.
No.
You can just tell by their comment they're 3 minutes in and you're just like, come on.
Yeah.
You do the rest.
I loved that real time though. The flame shooting out the second funnel, it was shocking, but I thought it was cool. And I thought they wouldn't have put it there for no reason. But the stern almost rolling onto its side, I thought, fuck, that's like so... Because that's how ships sink. Ships don't tend to sink. And if the ship's sinking with a list as is, it makes no sense that all of a sudden when there's a massive hole ripped in it, that it would then sink like handsomely by the head. Like, that makes no sense. So watching it roll onto its side... like actually gave me butterflies. I was like, whoa, that's real.
They don't sink pretty.
No.
You know? It's not like the 1997 film, as great as it is, you know, they were going for that cinematic of, wow, look at that, that's incredible. They don't sink pretty. You know, you see the Costa Concordia, that wasn't like a pretty, I don't even know if you could describe it as but like a cinematic sink. Mm-hmm. It was not like a cinematic thing that happens. It's like they're filling with water, they're going to go down. They're not going to go, oh, I need to go this way because it looks cool.
Yeah.
I'm not going down. It's like, I feel like people need to sort of understand that.
But I think Cameron did the spin thing on his recreation because he did that 20 years later thing where they sat down and made it an entirely new animation where they also did the crack and spin. That's the thing with the gatekeeping as well. It's like people have been really protective about the vertical break. It's like, because I remember as well, like there was a lot of backlash because as soon as they did that spinning thing, people were like, "What about the vertical break? It went vertical when it sank." How do we know?
It's really interesting because, on the one hand, so when the second funnel's shooting flames and the stern rolls onto its side, their defense, rightly, is, well, the survivor testimony says that. But then on the flip side, you've got Lightoller who says the ship didn't break and it sank almost perpendicular, like a finger pointing to the sky. So it's really interesting because by that standard, technically, Honor and Glory could then make a real-time sinking animation where it doesn't visibly break and it sinks perpendicular, and they would still be correct. Because that's what people saw. And it wasn't just Lightoller. He was the most prominent and listened to. Again, I've alluded to that.
It is a problem, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's actually really interesting because if it was an underwater break, if it wasn't a visible break, but then, you've got Charlotte Collier who says that she watched a fan of red sparks erupt she watched it break. She said it was as if she watched the ship get cut with a knife. Like, she's very clearly watched the ship break, but it's all about, again, Lightoller is a little bit of a, he was trying to climb on top of an overturned lifeboat while a vent twice tried to suck him underwater. You're telling me that he was able to watch the ship and what it did? Liar. He wanted.
But there's also the mentality with him that, like, he works for the company, and it's in the company's best interest that their ships are considered sound even when they're sinking. If that makes any sense, like,
because if you describe in the newspaper at the time that Titanic would have sunk like vertical, like straight down, intact, which until Ballard it was believed that it sunk. Even Race the Titanic has Titanic complete. Only the second funnels have somewhat been damaged. It's an entire ship, and if you're telling it's that solid, it'll just sink in one piece. That's I guess good reputation.
But what I think is interesting, like, they went on. So you look at the differences, say, between the Titanic and the Britannic, and they completely changed the structure of the expansion joints. Like, obviously, they knew something went wrong there.
Yeah.
Like, they changed so many things in terms of structural soundness throughout the upper portion of the ship, throughout the entire hull, basically, in terms of strengthening and ensuring that something along the lines of what they may have assumed happened, even if they never publicly said it, to Titanic wouldn't happen again. It's like, of course, Lighttoller's going to say, like, what was it? I forget. Someone described him as a company man at some point, like multiple times. Like, went on to become. Yeah, so I don't take his word at face value whatsoever. I see him as a really valued employee.
And I think that
other people are far more truthful. They have nothing to lose in terms of saying.
I also think it's a more modern thing that we've taken in more with this account, because back then it would have been like first class, and third class people or lower would have been like practically not listened to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think they spoke to any third class people in the inquiry or women. I think in the British Rec Commission they spoke to one woman, which I think was Emily Ryerson, and that's why her testimony is kind of so used in detail. The British Rec Commission spoke to one woman, the American inquiry spoke to no women, and neither spoke to third class. Because, fuck it, they can...
America was still 8 years away from giving them the vote, so...
I know, yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting, the whole idea. I think Lightoller even said in his book, an airing of dirty laundry would help no one. So he kind of, he's alluding to, he's not saying it outright, but he's like, there's no point. He basically, in the company, the White Star Line, Harland and Wolff, they all wanted people to think, yeah, your relatives died, sorry about it, but they died in like this tomb, this really beautiful, pristine, gorgeous tomb that, like, and Raised the Titanic, they thought would be raised as a tomb, as this big, intact. Yeah. And that's not the case. They didn't want people to think that your loved one was mangled and torn apart by wood and metal and fire, and like that's not the picture they wanted to paint, because who wants to paint that? Like, it's horrific. But if it happened nowadays, the Costa Concordia, which was a modern ship, 2 of the people who died, of the 32 people that died, father and daughter, died. The lights were still on, the ship had only just really started sinking, but ships aren't designed to be on their side. They're not. They fell through a wall, which was starting to become the floor because it was like tilting, and they were trying to walk to safety, and people watched this man and daughter fall through the wall into water and die.
I never knew that.
And that was on the Costa Concordia in 2012. So that just shows you, ships are not designed, and that was in 2012. So 100 years prior, are you telling me that the Titanic, Lightoller, love you because Dunkirk, you're a bit of a hero, but in Titanic, you're a bit of a shady bitch. So, basically.
I mean, it's also because, like, almost immediately after the sinking, we see this, like, romanticizing the sinking itself. Like, I mean, what Thomas Hardy published Convergence of the Twain in 1912, and that, like, puts, like, the concept of it being this, like, glorified tomb at the bottom of the ocean on a completely different level.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's a really beautiful poem.
So, Convergence of the Twain by Thomas Hardy. Lines on the loss of the Titanic. 1. In the solitude of the sea, deep from human vanity and the pride of life that planned her, stilly couches she. Steel chambers late the pyres of her salamandrine fires, cold currents thrid and turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. Over the mirrors meant to glass the opulent, the sea worm crawls, grotesque, slimed, dumb, indifferent. Jewels in joy designed to ravish the sensual mind lie lightless, all their sparkles bleared and black and blind. Dim moon-eyed fishes near gaze at the gilded gear and query, what does this vaingloriousness down here? Well, while was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the imminent will that stirs and urges everything prepared a sinister mate for her, so gaily great, a shape of ice, for the time far and dissociate. And as the smart ship grew in stature, grace, and hue, in shadowy silent distance grew the iceberg too. Alien they seemed to be, no mortal eye could see, the intimate welding of their later history, or sign that they were bent to, by paths coincident, on being anon twin halves of one august event, till the spinner of the years said now, and each one hears, and consummation comes, and jars two hemispheres.
That was quite interesting.
Yeah. I wanted to make a point though about earlier with the whole romanticizing of the ship, because I'm reminded of that was stewardess she was in the first class who survived the sinking and then went on to the Titanic.
Violet Jessup.
Yeah. And I believe she was of the opinion and she just wanted people to just leave it to rust on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean because she didn't see it all. Can understand. She's just like, just let it rest. There's nothing romantic about it. It's a ship that sunk, people died, blah blah blah.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's like, obviously it's been so romanticized because the films is like the Titanic was the biggest ship in the world, the most beautiful. Everybody loved it. It was incredible.
It's a good story.
I mean, just look at Titanic Blood and Steel, for example. Yeah, and I just find it's quite interesting because really, it actually wasn't that big of a deal because the Olympic was there and she was the new ship that was amazing. Titanic was just the next.
It's the aftermath really that's made her famous because Olympic was launched with this big fanfare. It's just a new type of ship and party and all that, and Titanic is just like, oh yeah, here you go.
Here's another one.
It's in the water, hooray! We built one. Until the next one.
Like had Titanic not sank, she would be a footnote on the story of the Olympic, which wouldn't actually be that big anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just find it quite interesting how Hollywood has like romanticized that, and people latch onto that as well. Like going back to the whole gatekeeping thing, get into the story, and I'm sure most of us did as well. Like looking at the film, saying, "Oh my god, this amazing, brand new, incredible, technically advanced ship has sunk in 4 days."
So I think the irony is part of what initially captured lots of people's interest. Not just the irony, because if it had been like a smaller ship that didn't have lots of rich, wealthy politicians and aristocrats and socialites on it, and it sank on its maiden voyage in the same circumstances, it wouldn't have caused the same fanfare. However, I think that with the Titanic, if the First World War hadn't happened, I think it still would have been one of the most tragic things to happen in, kind of Europe, America, Britain, and it would have prolonged, and there would have potentially been that interest that would have pervaded. I think World War One kind of cut that off because it was only like 4 years afterwards, and I think it very much not 2 years, 2 years afterwards. Yeah, I think it kind of killed it because. She wasn't even really built or intended to break records because Olympic had done that. Olympic had broken the records. Olympic, although she was not as big in terms of like gross tonnage and space on board, she had done that. So the White Star Line ticked the box. We've won against Cunard, so we don't actually need to win against ourselves. That's not what we're doing. We're just building 3 ships because the Mauretania and the Lusitania, there was 2. We want to do 3 because why not?
Weekly service.
My impression of the different approach to the Atlantic crossing for the different companies. Cunard is more about speed, while White Star Line is like, okay, we're not exactly going to focus on the speed because our expertise is in luxury.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to put all the thing we can, because you know, just looking at the designs, even because I've talked to friends about the Olympic class, and there's just something about the design, the straight lines, just pleasing to the eye. I don't know what it is. It's just because then you see like Lusitania and Mauritania. It's like, yeah, sure, they have that beautiful front end, but when you go aft, it's like, what the hell happened?
It's a hangover of Victorian design, like what we see. Like it's such, maybe this is a very odd thing to say, but like Edwardian design is all about form and structure, and we're seeing a lot more even lines. We're seeing a lot more like balance, whereas Lusitania, Mauritania, it's a hangover of Victorian design, just being like, just put it all in, make it work.
Yeah,
like find a way to make it work. And it's like interesting that in the course of, like, you look at initial designs for the Olympic class, and it's quite literally really, really, really similar, still broken apart, superstructure, bits and bobs here and there that just don't quite work. And then the moment that they put it all together, you're like, that's different. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know, it wasn't obviously game-changing or groundbreaking in many ways, but it did shift the design of shipbuilding in an Edwardian sense, if that makes any...
Because I think as you look at Cunard liners after the Olympic class, they're definitely taking a different approach to ship designing after that.
Mm-hmm. And even in the 1953 film, it's really funny because although the ship had only sank 41 years prior, they clearly thought the Olympic class were like gross and old and horrible, because the sets they used were more like the Lusitania and the Mauritania. They were like double-heighted rooms. They were huge rooms, like ballrooms with balconies, and every public room had a skylight. But the Titanic and especially the Olympic were criticised for only having like single-heighted rooms and for being really stuffy and really warm. And passengers that came onto the ship, even Titanic, and this was a reason that a lot of portholes were open, they complained that the electricity, it was great because electricity, woohoo! But actually, it means I can't turn my heating off and my room is boiling hot. I hate this. This is horrible. And due to reasons, there were rooms that hadn't even been painted yet, so they were still being painted on the voyage, and that's why the windows were open in those rooms, to let the smell of the paint out, because paint was much stronger back then than it is now. So
different components of it making it more toxic.
Yeah, so nowadays...
Good thing we have health and safety these days.
I know, thank God for that. But
what is it? You always wonder, like, I mean, who was it? Was it Ava Hart who was like, I can still smell the fresh paint from, obviously, Titanic. That comes from, was it Ruth Becker or was it Ava Hart? I can't remember.
So one of them definitely, James Cameron didn't pluck that out of thin air. He definitely got that from a survivor. But so it just shows that the Titanic, they were beautiful ships. I think they were like stunning. Like Chandler's saying, they were very symmetrical as opposed to having the funnels like right on the front, which I think looked weird on the Mauritania and Lusitania. Again, stunning. And I actually think the interiors on the Lusitania, in some ways, I prefer over Titanic in some areas. Not all of them. It's like a 50-50 split.
I'm looking forward to the guy, I can't remember his name now, the guy that was originally with Titanic Honor and Glory, who used to make the Lego videos. I can't remember his name.
Tom Linsky.
Tom Linsky, that's it. He's making a similar version of Titanic Honor and Glory, but of the Lusitania as like a full museum. Mm-hmm. Really looking forward to that release because I think that's going to be incredible.
I got a lot of really shady comments and actually a few unfollows because I shared a screenshot or a post that Tom, I think it's Historical FX is the YouTube channel. They shared a photo of the purser's office on the Lusitania, and it was... I didn't know what it looked like. If he'd posted it, I wouldn't have known. But it was stunning. It was just really beautiful. And I shared it to my story, tagged them, and I said what it was, and I was like, I think this is beautiful. And I was like, hot take, I think the purser's office on the Lusitania was more beautiful than the Titanic's purser's office. And people were messaging me, they were like just indignant that how dare I, how like blasphemy, like how dare you say anything was more beautiful than... I'm like, fuck off. Like people before Titanic was even built were going on to Olympic and going, single height rooms, fuck off, I'd rather die. Like
they were Titanic Olympic way before.
Yeah, they were going on to Olympic and they were going, Captain Smith cancelled. Like they were just fucking raging. Honestly, like, Jesus. Like, so, me in 2000, the year of our Lord, 2022, saying, I think Lusitania's purser's office is more pretty than Titanic's, and folk are like, Titanic artist? Cancelled. I'm like, fuck off. Like, I can say what I want. And it's also true.
Yeah, I hate the question, Team Cunard or Team West. I'm like, both, damn it, they're merged.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it's like, you fly the flight at the time that's right for you to cross the Atlantic on. Like, back in the day, you'd sail on the ship that's right on the day you need to leave. Like, they didn't go all the time. Like, they might be constantly running, but, like, you couldn't be like, I will only sail on this one ship, because you'd wait a month for it to come back. Like,
I mean, some people were, but they would have the money to afford being able to wait. So they'd be like, "Oh, I'm sailing on this. I'm sailing on this."
Yeah, exactly.
I think normal passengers and immigrants and stuff like that would just be like, "Fuck it, this is a ship to the States. I'm going."
Designs for like Lusitania are probably more groundbreaking in a lot of respects, but I will say the layout of first class in terms of common rooms, I find really not as interesting or not as dynamic as it is on Titanic. And obviously, like, we can debate about the first class lounge not being used because it was on A deck. But I think the fact that they put all of the major public rooms on the boat deck on Lusitania is sort of, I don't know why I don't like it. It just doesn't speak to me. It doesn't vibe well.
I get that. There's something about, the richest and the most wealthy and posh of the passengers being in these the most opulent, like, extravagant rooms on the ship, and then as soon as they walk out of them, they're on the boat deck, which is the most exposed to rain and weather and the horribleness. Whereas on the Titanic, at the top, that was kind of, you had your officers' quarters, and then it was the raised roof of the lounge, and then you had that weird room that had, like, water shit in it and dogs or whatever. And then you had, like, another raised roof, and that was it. Like, that's all you need. Like, why would you want to have rich people walking out into the weather? So actually having them walk out into A deck, the enclosed promenade. Exactly. Like, that makes much more sense. So there's benefits to Titanic, and I think if there was a kind of an amalgamation, of course, if there was nowadays, it would be like, it wouldn't meet any safety regulation. It would be like the most fire hazardous thing on the sea.
Yeah.
You'd basically die. It's like inevitable that you would just die. So it's not even up for debate. You would just die. So, like, the two most beautiful ships of the day, squish them together, you're gonna die. Like that. That's essentially what's up. Yeah, because actually I was thinking recently, so I was watching, there's a YouTube channel called Fascinating Horror, and it's really good. So
love that. I watch that like every day with my dinner.
Yeah, like, he's not salacious. He goes, like, so he can go from, he did one about the Edmund Fitzgerald ship sinking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then he's done one about, like, theme parks that have lots of deaths. He's done ones about, like, hospitals that go on fire, and it's not the fire that kills people, it's the toxic fumes that come out, like the X-ray prints.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fascinating. Such a cool channel. But he did one about, what was it? I forget the name of the ship. It's really bad. But basically, it was a modern ship. It hit another ship, and it burst an oil tank, and both ships went on fire. Yeah, one of the ships got help, and it was fine. They put the fire out. But for some reason, I don't know why, because it was like the middle of the day, I'm sure, they were like, oh, the ship that hit us was a small tugboat, so it's fine, don't worry about it. But it wasn't a small tugboat, it was a cruise ship, and it was full of people. And it was on fire, so they had put a call out for help, and it kind of cut out. It was very intermittent. But the people that got the call assumed that they were informing them about the ship that was already being seen to. So they were like, cool, we've got it. It's under control. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So the people that were on this cruise ship went into a fireproof room to protect themselves. So they didn't burn to death, but the fire got so bad that they all died. Everyone on the ship died, because the ship just drifted into the sea, and they all suffocated, they all died. And a couple of people were found on the boat deck, so they survived the initial, like, gassing in this room, tried to escape, but obviously the fire was, like, all over the ship, and the ship was just found completely burned out. And the reason I mention this, it's horrific, but it's fascinating, because, like the Titanic, things were changed. This happened, it was horrific, but you don't learn until you do something wrong. So something went wrong, and then you learn from that. But I was looking at the photographs of the a la carte restaurant on Titanic today, Olympic, it would have been Olympic, and I noticed the ceilings are beautiful. Some beautiful like molding on the ceilings, and there's like wooden beams and lights. Like, love it. Where's the fucking sprinkler system, bitch? Like, as soon as there's a fire, what you gonna do? Like, and it kind of showed me like clearly there hadn't, because ships had been mostly made of wood at this point, and actually Titanic, there's a lot of wood on the Titanic, but
wood panels everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. But clearly, like fires, people were so used to them, but there was possibly no such thing as like a sprinkler system. Like, it just wasn't a thing that was like could be conceived. But fires were so common on ships. So the fact that in 1912, like, it might have not been an iceberg that sank the Titanic. What if there had been a fire on April 14th in the middle of the Atlantic? What would they've done? Like, they probably couldn't have done anything. They'd have just burned, and then no one would have known. And this burnt hulk of a ship would have drifted into New York Harbor, and they'd been like, shit, fuck, like, that's bad. Really,
I don't remember them painting Titanic black. That's not paint.
Yeah, like, all the funnels are black, the supers, like,
what's this YouTube channel?
Fascinating Horror.
Fascinating Horror. The profile picture is a crow, like a black crow.
I got it.
It's very good. It's fantastic.
It wasn't the MV Conception, was it? I think that might be another ship that caught fire.
Not sure.
Oh, the Sultana?
That's it, the Sultana, yeah.
It was a paddle steamer. It was the Sultana, yeah.
Oh, no. The Sultana's also one that went on fire, but this was a modern cruise ship. This happened in, like, the 90s or the 80s. This was, like, modern. So the Sultana was horrific. The Sultana's...
Yeah, the Sultana, I actually... On my Instagram, I wanted to start doing a series about different shipwrecks.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a piece about it's not coming up on my camera, there we go, about the Sultana.
Yeah.
So it's blurred in and out. But yeah, I wrote a bit about that because I'd also... I think I didn't do it because at the time I was like, oh, I'm getting so many likes, I'm getting all this. And then I posted that and everyone was like, eh. And then I just stopped. Whereas I feel like I need to sort of just post what I want. That's something else. But yeah, I was reading about that, the Sultana, and that was...
Yeah, they did one about the Sultana, which is horrible, but this was like modern day. So they had like radios and stuff. Like people...
Is this the Scandinavian Star?
Yes. That could be, yeah.
That was some
April 7th, 1990.
trials about that a few years ago.
Yeah, I do remember.
Because they're still working on that case, apparently.
It was just horrific. Like, and the idea that something, modern day, that people could still die in that way, it's just horrible. But it just shows, for ships of the time of, the Titanic and the Olympics time, Lusitania's time, anything could happen. And it doesn't, even the Titanic, people are like, oh, well, if they had enough lifeboats, everyone could have survived. Absolutely not, because it took them...
Well, they barely got them off anyway.
Yeah, that's an argument
I haven't punched anymore. There wasn't time for that.
Yeah, like...
It's like
the two last ones were washed off, so yeah, that's definitely an argument that I've been working against over the last few years, because, coming into Titanic, you hear the numbers adding up. Okay, there's 2,000 something people in the Titanic, there's 20 odd lifeboats, what do you do? And then it's just, you think, okay, they got the 16 ones off, they got, was it the 4 collapsibles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the last 2 ones were washed off, so...
However, I do slight... So, yeah, I agree that, they didn't have time to launch all these lifeboats. However, people did survive on the 2 that were washed off.
Yes.
So it's possible if there were a load more lifeboats floating around the sea, people could have still climbed into them and on top of them. It wouldn't have been massively different.
So what's interesting, let's look to the Lusitania about this, because I agree with you. But releasing a lifeboat is not an easy thing.
No.
A number of people who even were on lifeboats that had been launched on Lusitania and they still weren't able to be released when they got to the water. Like, they had the collapsibles that floated off weren't connected properly. Like, they could float off, but like those lifeboats they'd have gone to the bottom of the sea. Unless they had been able to literally release them from the davits as the ship was going down, it's just not practical that's the way it's going to go.
I get that, but then at the same time, Lusitania, it sunk in 18 minutes. They didn't have that time.
Time is definitely a big thing.
But then I do see as well, the officers wouldn't have gone, well, hold on, the ship's almost sunk. Release. So I do still get that, but...
And also, I think with the Titanic, like with the Lusitania, it was very apparent that we're in a really bad position. But obviously, the Titanic, it took almost an hour, didn't it, before they even launched the first lifeboat because of all the confusion. And then obviously, because there's no PA system, there was the whole trying to get the message to all of the crew. It's kind of interesting when people throw those sort of arguments out, isn't it? Because it's like, well, yeah, more lifeboats would have been a good thing, but you need to take into account all of the other things that were going on at the same time. And I think a lot of people forget that, especially like we were saying earlier, like the casual people who, might have just seen the film and seen these basic figures and like, oh, but why this, why that? And then, I find it interesting. Then going back to the topic as well, like gatekeeping, you have people say like, oh, well, you can't talk about that. You should know all of this other stuff.
I do, yeah. It does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Or like the whole fad, I mean, it doesn't happen so much now, but remember sort of like in the late 90s, early 90s, there was all of those documentaries and it was like, it's like Titanic's fatal design or like, this is the Titanic.
There was like a scapegoat thing every time. It's like, because I think the second from disaster came to the conclusion that Titanic sunk because the rivets in the front were too weak. And then I watched was the Smithsonian documentary, still my favorite documentary on the whole thing, because I think it was one of the first to touch on the air mirage thing. But he also highlighted one thing within the first few minutes of the documentary. It's like, okay, this is a misconception. Titanic was built like a battleship or something like that. It was very good design because then you have the whole steel thing to dive into.
Then people forget as well, like if you look at the Olympics, she was built the same as the Titanic, and you had. I mean, how many collisions did she have? Like
she was hit by the Hawk. She sunk a fucking U-boat. They saw it and they're like, we don't even have time to fire upon it. Fucking ram that bitch.
See, in like the 1900s, the 1910s, they were so polite. So they were like, oh, we'll call her Old Reliable. That'll do. Old Reliable. No. Old Badass. That's what Olympic was. Old fucking badass.
She's an old bad bitch.
Old bad bitch. That's Olympic was she not the only at the time non-combative ship or something to sink an enemy? And I think still holds that title. She was the only non
warship.
And the fact that she, when she hit the U-boat, she was just a bit dented. It just kind of goes to show, doesn't it? It's just
the same with the Nantucket lightship. It was nothing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That too. Yeah.
It's like, oh, what, we hit something?
Nantucket light ship. It's a ship.
Yeah.
The Olympic hit it head on and had minor damage. So I don't know if anyone's getting to where I'm going with a head-on collision.
You mean a head-on collision?
For me, the first time I ever heard I'll directly quote it, if you struck the berg head-on, only one compartment would have been flooded. Like, where did that even come from? Because for me, it's old gravelly Captain Smith from Titanic 96 who said it.
But I listened to you with Ballard where he mentions that because, Ballard was, of course, one of the first people to see the wrecks. So I think one of his ideas was that you could just hit it straight on. But then you had the Britannic thing that they did where you find out that what happened was that the mine dented somewhat the hull.
Warped the hull.
Warped the hull. Yeah, that's a better word for it. And then, you couldn't get the watertight doors down. Mm-hmm. So that's what some people would believe could have happened if they took it head on.
Yeah.
See, I do personally believe that if it hit head on, it would have caused a lot more extensive damage. It would have been a much harder crash because it was still going pretty fast at the time, and it could have caused the instance to be a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still open for people to discuss and share their view of why they think that wouldn't have happened. I've not actually seen anyone use the Nantucket light ship as an argument, but as we were talking about it, it hit head on. I mean, I know it's a light ship, so it's hollow inside, hollow-ish inside compared to an iceberg. But could we not draw comparisons there? And I'm open for people to discuss it. I don't think that should be shut down straight away.
Don't know the person's name. Someone, it might even be one of the authors of Honesty of Glass, but don't hold me to that. But it's someone that's very prominent. It's not like a no one. It's someone whose name I recognize instantly. Someone's writing a paper and has done the physics, and there's like illustrations and stuff. I'll find it. I'll send it to you.
Is it Kent Layton?
Yes, is it? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen it, Dean?
I saw, because I didn't post in one of the groups saying like, "Oh, this is coming soon." Yeah, because I remember being very excited about it.
Yes.
I think they even commented that I was like, "This is going to be an interesting read."
So someone's basically putting like a digital, like you can read it online. It'll be a thing. Either way, prove or disprove the whole head-on collision, and they've done the works. But on the link that they shared to kind of tease it, there was an illustration of the damage that would have initially been caused, and the front of the ship was gone, like it was ruined. And it's really interesting because I think people think that the damage would have been equal to the front of the ship that was caused by on the side of the ship, and it's like there's a huge difference between a scrape and a bang. There's a huge difference. If you're running and you see a wall and you're like, oh my god, I'm going to run into the wall, and you move, you might scrape your thigh, you might get a huge cut, it might be really sore, it might bleed a lot, but it's better than like a broken nose and losing an eye and a burst lip and missing your 4 teeth. Like, they're totally different. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're totally different.
Because
a lot of the people said like they didn't even feel the iceberg. But imagine if it was a head-on collision, everyone's just
thrown from their bed.
Is this the image that you're referring to?
No.
Oh yeah. See, I've seen this one before. I think
I've seen this one
a while back. Yeah,
I've seen that one before, but it was a side-on.
There's still a lot of people dying right there.
It was on Facebook, Louis. It was a side-on blueprint illustration of the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Look at the Stockholm in Andrea Doria. Like, have a look at that, because that was a head-on collision between ships, and like the damage to that.
It's interesting. It's one of those things that when people say shouldn't have sank, I don't think that's the words they should be using. I think perhaps saying shouldn't have sank as quickly, because the whole thing with the iceberg collision was that unfortunately that opened a number of watertight compartments, and it opened the worst case scenario. It opened that number of watertight compartments. So if it had opened 3, Thomas Andrews would have been like, I'm still daddy, it's fine. But it opened like more than that, so he was like, I'm mummy, fuck. And he couldn't cope, which is understandable. But with a head-on collision, I personally think that would have, it would have killed a lot of people, initially. But I personally think, and we'll see, when we find, Dean and I, when we find this link again, we'll share it to you, and then it's going to be published. We can all read it. We can discuss it in future. I think it would have maybe only opened the first 2 or 3. So the idea of it wouldn't sink the ship, that's not what we're talking about, because even if all the people are evacuated from the ship, all the survivors, if the Carpathia, the California, Cape Race, if they all come to the ship and get everyone off, the ship might still sink. But that's not the point. What we're talking about is, would it have stayed afloat long enough to get those people off? We're not saying would it stay afloat. That's stupid. Yeah. Because if you're letting water rise to the top of a bulkhead, it might take a long time, but it will still eventually sink. You can't have a ship that's mortally wounded just not sink, because that water is going to keep rising. It has to go somewhere. So I think people saying, a head-on collision wouldn't have sank it, they're being really naive.
Yeah.
I think the question is, would it have lengthened the sinking? That's the question.
Yeah, because 2, whereas it's like just about 2 hours 40 or something. Mm-hmm. So that's still a long time compared to other maritime disasters. But if you could have prolonged that to like 4 hours, you would have had like the.
You would have been there.
Yeah. Okay. Question if you could have taken the capacity, but I don't know.
100%.
There's still a long way until I can rule in Californian in that equation, I have to say.
And that's kind of what we said earlier with, would having more lifeboats have saved more people? No, because the officers wasted. They didn't know what they were doing. They weren't trained. They weren't experienced with the lifeboats. So there was like an hour nearly where they just didn't get people off the ship. And even if they had wanted to, people didn't want to get off the ship because there was no... I'm sure if the ship had hit the iceberg head on, people would have been like, 100%, get me in a lifeboat, I want off the ship right now. And actually, more people would have lived even just for that fact alone. But with the side-on collision that we had and that happened, people didn't want to.
The thing with people getting in the boats, I think it was Ken Marshall who commented on being on the 1997 set, where they had that, I can't remember how many degrees list, but he said like within a few days you didn't even notice it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's quite obvious if you tell people this ship is sinking, you need to get in a boat, and they're looking, well, I don't feel tilt, and it's pitch black down there. You're making me go down into that wobbly little thing. Hell no.
Also, the ship was already tilting. It had a 4-degree tilt to the port the entire journey. So having a little extra tilt, they would have been like, "Is it?"
That's how
I was like. And then you have that whole curve thing as well. You wouldn't be able to tell until like way later in the sinking.
I was going to say, I was like how Lawrence Beasley talked about how he only noticed it when he tripped on the stairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I was like, that's so interesting because you wouldn't physically see any difference, but it's when your physical memory is different to what it actually looks like that's where the difference is. It fascinates me.
If there's a flight of stairs, like Lawrence Beasley, he'd have used those stairs quite a few times. So his muscle memory, if you're, I know me, if I'm running up a flight of stairs, I kind of go like two steps at a time because I'm like 6'4", I'm quite tall. I go up like 2 steps at a time. But if the building, like Chandler and like Lawrence Beasley was saying, it has changed, it's different. So your muscle memory is doing the same thing, but your environment has completely changed. So you're
But there was a science experiment where they had a staircase and they got people to go up and down the staircase, and then what they did was they adjusted one of the steps. They added like a slight platform to it, like only a couple of millimeters, but that millimeters made them, the same people going up and down the stairs, they'd keep like tripping up the first few times, and then they'd get used to it, take away that step, go up and down, they'd be like, oh, and like have a stumble again.
You just don't even notice it's just those couple of stairs, but you don't notice the...
But it just shows you, and it's, Louis brought up a really good point, that the fact that the ship had been listing the entire voyage. Again, people don't know that, and that's fine. It's kind of superfluous. It's also...
Fine inconvenience.
It's one of those things that it's like, you don't need to know it, but then actually it helps explain why people didn't want to go into the lifeboats, because there was already this sense of unbalance that people didn't even know was unbalanced because they were so used to it, because it was like that when they got on the ship. So this,
Plus you're on a ship. Have you seen these ships in like bad weather? Like the slightest wave, these ships are going, oh.
I was on a cruise ship in 2016, and you genuinely wouldn't have known you were on a ship. It was Norwegian Cruise Lines cruise ship. It was the Norwegian Jade. So you'd have thought you were in like a Vegas hotel. It was like that kind of opulence, and it was cool. It was nice. It was whatever. But my ex and I went over to the like information desk for something, and we had like plastic cups with drinks in them, and we'd sat them down, and we were talking to the women. And out of the blue, this hadn't happened yet, but then out of the blue, the cups just started sliding around the desk, but you couldn't actually see or feel the ship doing that. All you could see were these cups that were like less than half, maybe like a quarter full. These almost empty cups were all of a sudden moving around this desk. And I was fine. I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, awesome. And my ex was like he nearly threw up. He really didn't like it. But that was the only indication that we were on something moving.
Yeah. I mean, ships back then, they were rocket. I mean, you see, like the Poseidon Adventure, that was written. The guy that wrote it was on the Queen Mary and he got hit by a wave and the ship rocked massively. So those.
I think they're like, what if it flipped upside down?
Didn't that happen to the Olympic as well? Didn't the Olympic get hit by a wave, and wasn't it? They said
Titania definitely hit a rogue wave.
Yeah, there's a photo on the poop deck of the Olympic, isn't there? And it's like you can see that the ship's tilted like this because it's in a storm.
The Queen Mary, there was when I find the video, I'll let you know. But it was on really bad water, and they closed the public rooms because obviously it was too dangerous to be inside them.
Yeah, I've seen this.
And the next morning, when it was calm and they opened the rooms, not only the furniture, but like the walls, the piano, the pillars, everything had been turned to splinter. It had been destroyed because it had just been crashed around the whole night. So all of a sudden, like all this furniture was just like tiny bits of wood because it had just been completely decimated throughout the whole night, which is just like the thought of that is horrific.
Yeah, I've just sent a couple of photos from the Olympic during rough weather, just to show how much they do rock. Like, if you look at the scene in the background, that looks like the normal ocean. It looks like.
I mean, that second picture looks like the sinking of the Titanic.
Yeah.
But to think, so when you look at that first photo of the docking bridge on the stern, so that's leaning to port. Wait,
port.
Yeah, it's leaning to port. So technically, that's what, even before maybe not as drastically as that, but even before the sinking started in earnest, that's what the stern would have looked like.
Yeah.
Because of, like we're saying, there was a list to port.
Yeah. And you can see in that picture, people just sat there on the benches. They're just, without a camera,
they're just chilling. They're like, this is fine. It is what it is. Like, well, it's fine.
Yeah, I do think that's one thing that Cameron's movie captures perfectly. You just no, we're dressed enough fine, but we would like a brandy.
He captures the. Yeah, he does. He captures the
captures the essence of like
the calm kind of casualness of it. But I think, and I'm sure if one day he comes on the podcast, he won't. But I think he himself would say, because I mean, I've said a couple of times, if I was to remake Titanic or just make a Titanic thing of my own, I don't.
Radio drama.
It's a thing. That's what I want to do. I want to do a radio.
Chandler.
No, that's a thing. I do want to do an audio drama. The whole thing with the Titanic is the unexpectedness of it, because I feel like with Cameron, the panic was kind of there, not instantly, but it kind of was. 5
minutes after the iceberg hits, the water's up to like the bow.
Yeah, the ship.
So I feel like there is a large time jump almost.
Yeah.
The water's up to the bow within 5 minutes, and then the forecastle is level with the water for like 30 minutes. Where it's like, no, like the minute the forecastle and the bridge, like as soon as B deck essentially was like level with the water, like you were fucked. Like there was no going back.
And then suddenly Jack and Rose are down by the dining room, and then they come up, and then they're on the lifeboat that should have left already or hasn't left yet, and it's just a bit like. Oh.
And I think part of the horror of Titanic is like the more I read about it, because I've learned more probably I think in the last year or 2 years than I've learned in my whole passing interest, because it wasn't like an active interest. It was just like it was a passive interest. It was what it was. But then being immersed in a kind of community of it, I've actively learned stuff. I've passively learned stuff. Now that I'm doing drawings where I'm trying to be as accurate as I can, down to like the flowers and the vases on tables, it's to that level of detail, which that's not necessary, but that's just a personal thing. And also because I don't.
It adds to it. I draw railways myself, but I've learned that the more you put like in the atmosphere around the thing you want to portray, the more you like. Even I sit down with some of my older drawings where I've added a lot of background detail. I'm just like, oh wow, because you immerse yourself into the art, and it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
Not so long ago, like with where I work. So I work for Lush, and we do what's called like well-being days. So we can literally like do whatever we want with the team. Like you can like do dancing or like stretches or whatever. So I was like, let's do a brief history of the Titanic. And to my amazement, loads of people were like, oh my God, that sounds great, But going on the detail part, I was like, I could just reiterate bare basic stuff that everybody kind of knows. So like probably you, Darren, when you said it was just your passing interest, you probably knew like the big basics. So I was just like, I'll do that. But then I started to put in loads more details and things. And then I even did like towards the end a Q&A, like a true or false thing for like the more lesser known things. So one of the questions I posted was true or false, were third class locked below deck? And I think about 99% of the people said yes, they were. And I was like, no, they weren't. Here's the detail. And I explained about like the railings on the deck and like the emergency doors, and it blew everyone's mind.
But it looks good on a film.
Yeah, it looks great and dramatic in a film, but you know, it is those tiny like details and nuances that I think are super important because it tells the story much better. And again, like it just adds to that interest. I just find that quite fascinating.
And I think it's one of those things that, like, jumping off on that, like there are so many things about this as a topic that make it stay in our minds. Like the fact that the ship sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes, that's the length of a modern play. Like it's just like weird, and people who were there will be like, they'll tell their story or obviously nobody today, but they would have told their stories, and it was very mundane. It was just a thing that they went through. They were there, and it's the other people, it's the rest of the world who dramatize it, who add these details, and they're like, well, no, I what was it? Dorothy Gibson was like, I was told there was danger. I got in a lifeboat, the first one to go, and then that was it. Like, I just sat and like, or all these other people who are like, it's just very like matter of fact. I woke up today, I had a banana, I went for a walk, I went to a workshop, and like it's going through your day because it's life. And I think very often we get into this headspace of like locking third class below decks, for example. Like we need to make it larger than life. We need to make it this like really big thing. And to, I guess, bring it back to gatekeeping, it makes me wonder, like, in terms of the story, what makes it a good story, and who gatekeeps it being a good story, and why do we allow certain myths to go unchecked, and or why don't we allow them? Because maybe we need it to be that. Maybe society, well, Titanic as society, who knows? But like, maybe there's this mentality of we need something that is so big and so easily explainable to somehow be unexplainable or be larger than life to make us feel something. And so it's this, I don't know, I get philosophical about things like that, where
that's a good point. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that, and I think, I don't know if it was in Ghost of the Abyss I heard that line, but it was like, you know, you take modern you and you put it on the Titanic. Like, what would I have done? What would people from modern day have done? And it is, after all, 1912 with 1912's traditions and people. And that's definitely one thing I got out of listening to that audio book of A Night to Remember, because it also describes the atmosphere at the time, how people treated each other. And that's a fascinating aspect of the thing, I feel.
Kind of touching on what Chandler said, it's really interesting because you've got this combination of, you know, what happened, we shouldn't dispute that, and it is what it is, and then you've got films that dramatize it to like a much larger extent. And so Facebook groups are like, you know, you can't talk about the V-break and you can't talk about Jack and Rose, and that's fine. But then if you were to say, well, Titanic Honor and Glory showed the ship, the stern roll onto its side, they would also say, well, you know, a lot of people said that was wrong. And that's not something that the film showed, like the James Cameron film. That's something that actually many survivors said happened, that the stern nearly rolled onto its side. But there's still that kind of gatekeeping element, you know. So we're not endorsing the James Cameron film. We're not endorsing anything really. We're trying to go by what survivors said. But we've still got all these people saying, well, no, because it didn't sink that way. But how do we know? We don't know. Like there's no way of knowing.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing that I think that's become at least my approach to the Titanic thing. It's like, for me, it's like this crime scene, or scene of disaster, and we only know what the people who were there have said. So there's no, and I think what the people end up doing accidentally or for whatever reason is that they need to have it this fixed thing from A to B. But of course, it's over 100 years ago, and I think the lines become more blurry in some areas, but more clear in others. So we learn more, and then maybe suddenly there's a new witness account we haven't accounted for earlier, and taking some stuff from each different one. And I don't think there's a straight red line that sort of tells the entire story, because there have always been small details that deviate from one account to another, and so I don't really, have this fixed thing. It's just when people say something that's like directly wrong, like all the times I've had to defend against the switch theory, or that Hitchens was somehow a coward of some sort. It's just like those kind of stories. I feel like needs to be defended. I wouldn't call it gatekeeping, because obviously when people tell me they either want to come off as something, oh, this is what I've heard, so naturally, and then I just tell them, well, this is based on this and this. So yeah, it's a difficult thing.
I think it's the way you approach it, isn't it? Because I think earlier, it's like you have these casual people who may have only just come across the film and want to know more, and they may have heard about the Switch thing, but should it be wrong of that person to come into a group and say, I heard the Titanic was switched with the Olympic? Like, in my opinion, that should be encouraged, and it's the way that people respond that should change. So
because I had a Facebook friend who went into that, who did a post where it's like, this is a story and it's actually true. I was like, I think you'll find, and then I laid out the evidence for him to study them himself. So not at all pushing myself into some kind of role where I'm like, I'm the curator of Titanic, you will listen to me.
I think that's the thing. That's the exact way to go about it. It's like, actually, it's an interesting theory, because it's so crazy in itself. It's interesting to read about, but you could go along the lines of, actually, that has been disproven, here's the evidence against it, provide them links, and then you educate them. So rather than saying, no, that's stupid, you're wrong, shut up, say, actually, that's wrong because
it's just listening to the evidence presented.
I think when it comes to gatekeeping, just listening to what we've all said, it's quite interesting, because I'd forgot that this happened, but sadly this did happen. A real survivor, which I think was Melvina Dean. But basically, she was at a convention. She was at a Titanic convention with people who were fans of the sinking. Let's bear in mind, she lost her father in the sinking. And she was there. She was speaking out of courtesy and, politeness. She was surrounded by, a bunch of people like us who were not there, were just interested in it. And she was holding the microphone. And she was talking about how she saw the ship break.
I've seen this.
Yeah, I know this one.
And the host of the convention snatched the microphone out of her frail old hand, told her how wrong she was, how mistaken she must be, and corrected her by saying that the ship could not have possibly broke. And then a few years later...
Sorry, Melvina Dean, you're saying? Is this a video?
Yeah, it was a convention in the 80s, I think.
In the 80s, okay.
It was a video.
I want to find this. I want to see this.
So do I.
Because
I've just opened up YouTube.
And the person who was 30 or 40 years old snatched the microphone out of her hand and was basically like, no, wrong. It didn't do that. And she was like, oh.
And obviously there's a misconception because he was at a different angle and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
I think one of the historians talked about it in documentaries. Yeah, because he thought, well, there's no one who's actually talking to the survivors, because this was back when the survivors were coming into their late 90s or something, and sitting down in communities and talking about it, but we're not asking the people who were there. And so he made an effort into befriending them all.
I think that was Paul Lee. I think Paul Lee might have been one of the people to do that. Don Lynch,
I think it was Don Lynch.
Don Lynch.
The earlier historians that basically anyone who was of note before the James Cameron film was made, essentially. Yeah. But that kind of shows. So basically, that this community, even before the internet, was at a point where we were willing to shout down survivors of the sinking because of what we thought was right. I think that's disgusting, and I actually think that's not gone away. I think that's still here. I think that people who, because my friend Nathan, he can't be on tonight, he basically said, just please mention that all I said in our Facebook group was, what's the proof that we have? How do we know that there was 3 blades? And all he was told, the responses were, the evidence. That was it. The evidence. And he was like, well, what's the evidence? Like, tell me the evidence. And that was it. People sarcastically and very vindictively and toxically saying the evidence. And he was like, I want to know. Like, I want to learn. I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm not trying to be a spanner in the works. I want to know what is and there was the evidence. So clearly they didn't know. They were just being little sheep that were following our Lord and Savior Titanic Honor and Glory, which is fine.
I find that crazy.
Aliens.
Because obviously the whole 3-bladed propeller thing came about because there is one, I think it's just the one evidence, and it's in a Holland and Wolff builder's notebook or something.
Yes.
And it says, I can't remember the exact wording, but it says to the effect Titanic 3 blades or something like that, and that is the evidence. But that's it. But the fact that people were so self-righteous enough to, fob your friend off and be like, "Oh, it's the evidence. How dare you not know?" is pretty disgusting.
That's the problem.
We're a group. We have the same interest. Help each other.
But then
that's so difficult.
Yeah, and there's the notebook. But then also after the sinking of the Titanic, they brought the Olympic in and they put on the 3-blade propeller on the Olympic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I can't remember I think they reverted back to the 4-blade or not.
They went back to 4 blades. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's another reason why people say it. But for them to just say the evidence and not actually give the evidence, like how easy was it for us just to say,
yeah, exactly.
That's what I think it is about Titanic. You can never just make it a lecture. It's always going to be a debate because you're going to have different sides and different aspects. And even if we just are armchair historians, we need to be open-minded because you can always learn something new. I mean, I think about a historian I was at a lecture with at some point where he starts the lecture off with saying, well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to warn you that everything I'm going to tell you tonight is a lie. And then he elaborated on it with, as a historian, you can never be entirely sure because there's always something new that you learn. Mm-hmm. And from my starting point with interest in Titanic until now, I have a much bigger picture of the whole thing.
You never know. In 30 to 40 years' time, there might come out evidence that the ship sank backwards and we're all going to be going,
yes!
Oh my God. Of course it did.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I just think, just try, and if you're going to correct someone or inform someone, just try and be a little bit diplomatic about it, I think that's the main takeaway. If you're never going to be able to stop online groups from censoring or gatekeeping. That's just something that's always going to happen, unfortunately. Even though if you think in the 80s, if Facebook existed, that convention would have gatekept the ship breaking, and the survivor technically would have been blocked. That survivor would have been blocked from Facebook groups for saying that the ship broke. And then 5 years after that, it would have been proven that the ship broke. If you think about it in that context, so we shouldn't just write people off and we shouldn't write theories off. I think we should kind of think about them logically. And that's part of the interest. That's part of what keeps Titanic so fascinating and has kept her so omnipresent for so many years. Not just, we said earlier, the kind of allusions to current climates and political issues and economic issues and all the rest, but all the kind of the little details, I mentioned earlier, like the tiny detail of what flowers were in the vases in the a la carte restaurant, which is so small and so insignificant. No one gives a fuck. But then you've got the huge, massive, did she break? Did she not break? That's that's huge.
Then you're asking the real question. I don't want to know the flowers, damn it.
And I'm like, yep. I'm like, we now know that she broke, but what fucking flowers were in the vases? Tell me. And I think that's what keeps the Titanic so kind of alluding, that there's so many questions that are not answered. And that even though that we know that she did break, that there's still so much debate about where and how, you know.
Yeah, because I think Tom Linsky did like a video last year, I think it was, where they did another live stream, and it was, because it was the 109th anniversary, and that was a bit different in terms of where it broke, and then it broke 2 places at once. Because that for me that was like mind blowing, because I was like, okay, I only knew they split like 1 point of the ship, but yeah, and then I remembered, I think it was Jack Thayer said that in this superstructure seemed to split, and then that instantly came to my mind. I was like, yeah, that makes so much more sense that it would break it. But then again, I don't say that's the definitive answer. That's how she broke, but it makes sense.
Yeah,
there are quite a few animations out now showing that the ship splits between the second and third, sort of like this, and then slightly further back again, peels off again, and you've got it falls down. And I think it's someone on lifeboat number 2. I've probably got that completely wrong, where they had to go all the way around the back of the ship to the side.
With
and
Officer Law,
Yeah, and they said that they saw the boilers fall out, which you wouldn't have seen because they were so low. So what they're thinking is that what they actually saw was the ship split in half, and then a forward section of the ship midway then falling down itself as well. And that's where they've sort of got this splitting twice rather than just one split.
We'll never know. And that's what I love about it. And that's why the next time we speak, we'll have so bloody much to talk about. So at this point, I basically just want to know, in the next 2 minutes, what is there anyone wants to say? Any kind of final thoughts or final feelings?
Follow me on Instagram, Titanic and Love Lines.
I'm just happy that you asked me. I've had really good fun, and I just think people on Facebook just need to calm down.
Yeah, calm down, you sassy bitches.
Yeah, I'm happy to have been a part of this too.
Yeah,
because I've been watching you and Louis doing the live streams. I'm like, oh, can I be in one?
This has been great.
I'll get myself a little gin.
This is the start of something new.
It is. I think I wasn't worried, but I was like, oh, how's it going to work? What's logistically in terms of
this has been a fun grill.
dynamics. But I actually think, and I might cut all of this out. I probably, what I'm saying right now, I will cut it out. But because it's like giving away the recipe. But I think that what's just happened in the last 2 hours and 40 odd minutes has been really good. I think it's potentially what's going to keep people coming back. And yeah, thank you all very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's genuinely been a pleasure. I've had so much fun